Good morning, everybody. Anthony says, hello, Eddie. Hope you're well. I'm well, thank you. Dave Stubbington says, good afternoon, Eddie. Yes, good afternoon to you. All right, I checked. That's why I'm a minute late. I checked to see if anyone had left any questions. And as far as I can tell, there's no advanced questions this week. So we'll just wait until you guys have something. I know we ended last time with me not having time for something. I can't remember what it was. You know what? Maybe I can pull that up separately from here. Let me see what I can do with that. I hope you guys are all well. Oh, pushed the wrong button. Sorry. Yeah, and I apologize. I've been saying that I'm going to schedule these in 24 hours in advance, but I had a bunch of hoops to jump through yesterday. You know, I think younger people don't feel the way about this that people my age do. But I don't like the FBI having my fingerprints. So, not that I've ever done anything. It's just, yeah, it's like one step. We give up our freedoms like one tiny step at a time. And I had to go get fingerprinted for the FBI yesterday so that I can do music programs in the schools. How bizarre is that? Huh? That's just really, really nuts, in my opinion. That's really nuts. And so anyway, that's what took up my time yesterday. And after that, I didn't have time to do anything else. Let me see if I can open last week's without messing up this. And the fingerprinting process today is weird, by the way. Toxic to, when I say toxic, I mean toxic to our minds, the way. Whoa, sorry about that. I hope you didn't hear that. Can't stand to hear my voice. I don't know why. All this time putting out these videos, I still can't stand to hear my voice. Yeah, it's not showing me the chat. Live chat replay. What if I do this? There it goes. Oh, sight reading. Is that what it was? Sight reading or something? Let me see. I think that's what it was. Let me go one more little bit farther. Yeah, I think it's sight reading. Let's talk about sight reading. Unless you guys have. Okay, let me answer your questions first. Anthony says, I have a trumpet lesson at 1 today. Woohoo! Tell her I said hello. Let me see if I have her name right. Misaki, right? Misaki. I think that's her name. Tell Misaki I said howdy. Anthony says, funny, on Saturday I feel like I have 2 trumpet lessons, one at 9:30. Oh, there's her name right there, Misaki, yes. Good. All right. Ken, good morning, Ken. This may be a question for the doctor, but I am having cataract surgery and I'm wondering if I will need to take a break from playing. Um, you know, I teach those wholesome musical priorities, right? And every time, and this just came up with a student recently, every time someone asks me a question like that, we do a summary of the wholesome priorities, right? And here's the wholesome priorities. We put first thing in our life is our belief, our faith. For me, I'm a Christian, so my values as a Christian come first. Then my health, then my family. And some people think health and family should be flipped. I don't agree with that. I think you're no use to your family if you're not healthy. Now, I understand that some people can abuse that. But anyway, that's how I have it. Health, family, your job. But anyway, the point here is that health is the second one. And sure, I always give that example about the guys that filed their teeth so they can play higher. That makes no sense. They put their health, they put trumpet playing higher than their health. But also the time when I came up with this. So back in the days when I was first formulating these priorities, someone came to me and said, Mr. Lewis, I'm so sorry. I didn't practice this week. I had the flu. And I'm like, don't practice when you've got the flu. Don't practice when you've got the flu. And I would say the same thing for any kind of surgery because you're creating pressure inside your body. Now, the question that you would ask your doctor is how long to take off, but you're going to have to take some time off anyway. So the question for the doctor is, should it be 2 days or 2 weeks? So, but yes, I'm not one of those guys that believes trumpet should be the most important thing in your life. And when we talk about the priorities, I love talking about priorities that way instead of making it emotional. Because that's most of the people who say, trumpet is the most important thing in my life, that they're being actually emotional. Most of them actually probably don't even believe that. Right? It's an emotional outburst, really. But yes, I think what happens is they view the world through those emotional lenses, so to speak, and they gush out the words and there's so many ways of putting this. I heard someone say that music was his wife and composition was his mistress, or something along those lines. And when he didn't feel like practicing, he would compose and back and forth. I think that's a very disgusting. But that's an example of someone saying music is the most important thing in my life. And I don't agree with that. I don't judge. That said, I don't judge people that do profess those kinds of things. But anyway, I was talking about the priorities, right? When you have priorities, it's no longer emotional because the priorities establish what happens in your life, right? So, if trumpet truly is the most important thing in your life, you're not going to get married. If you do get married, I feel sorry for your spouse, right? You shouldn't have children. And for that matter, your friends shouldn't trust you. You see what I'm saying? With priorities, when we talk about priorities, instead of gushing out emotional stuff, when we talk about priorities, it determines what gets done and what does not get done. It determines what fork in the road you're going to take. If you have an established set of priorities, so let's look at the wholesome musical priorities from that perspective. If my Christian faith comes first, then my career as a trumpet player cannot go against that faith. So, for example, I run my trumpet career like a business because it's what I do to make a living. And there are certain things that I read about business that I won't do because those things go against my Christian faith. Okay? Because that's at the top. What I believe is at the top. So I do not do things, for example, and this is a generalization, right? I don't do things for selfish reasons. When I play trumpet, it's not to satisfy some selfish urge that I've got. The trumpet is an instrument that I use, and I don't mean instrument as a musical instrument. I mean, music is an instrument that I use to communicate, to hopefully uplift people. It's not for me. It's not for my benefit. I have to run it like a business, because if I don't do that, then I can't pay the bills, and then I can't do that that uplifts other people. But see, that's me putting my Christian faith first. I hope that makes sense. Then the health thing, and which gets back to the point, right? I will not do stuff on trumpet. And one of those things is, if I have surgery, I'm not going to practice. A good example of that, a very good example of that is my mom was just here for 2 weeks. Now, I don't get to see my mom all that often. So for that entire 2 weeks, I did not practice. Because family is first before the trumpet. I did not practice for an entire 2 weeks. The only playing I did was if I had a gig or in my students' lessons. I hope that makes sense. And that's why we didn't have a Q&A 2 weeks ago, is because I was spending that time with my mom. Okay? So yes, I hope that puts that into perspective. I think it's with the surgeries of any kind, it's best to be on the safe side. Let me tell you guys a story. Now, these wholesome musical priorities, I didn't always live according to this. When I first started the wholesome musical priorities, it was because of something a student did that upset me very badly. I fired him, and sometimes he listens on these on these Q&As. Okay, so I don't want to say anything that would embarrass him. But something happened that upset me greatly, and I told him he's not going to be my student anymore until he gets stuff straightened out. And the time that passed after that, because he was a good student, right? And the time that passed after that, I had a lot of soul searching. Because if I'm, and you know what, my lessons work this way. I love the way my lessons work, right? Because I find something that works for me. I share it with the student. I see it the way that it works for the student, and I modify it because the student needs it in a certain way, right? So I modify it for the student, and then I say, wait a second, if I modify it for them, what if I tried that too? So then I start doing it that way, and then I teach the next student, and then modify it for him, and then or her, and then I say, well, maybe that modification. So what we have is this like teeter-totter back and forth between me and the students, and the ideas progress and grow. And that's what happened with these wholesome priorities. Before that time, and this was about 15 years ago that this happened. Before that time, I had moments when I put the trumpet before family, when I put the trumpet before my health. For example, practicing when I should be sleeping, stuff like that. So anyway, yes, I didn't always live this way. This is something that I developed as a necessity. And between the students and myself, they say that the best way to work out an idea is to tell somebody about it. Well, I'm telling students all the time about my ideas, so that ideas do get developed that way. All right. Dave says, in the UK, we have to do a criminal record check before working with kids, but no fingerprints. Yes, I've had that before. And, it's not a big deal. I don't mind necessarily just the fingerprints. It's that progression, right? It's before it was a criminal check. Now it's a criminal check and fingerprints. I was wondering, sitting there waiting to get fingerprinted, I was thinking to myself, how long is it until they ask you what your vaccination status is before you can go in there and work with the kids? When this thing is pretty much over, this whole COVID thing. So, yeah, that's the part I don't like, is that it's, I think that's the biggest mistake people are making with all of this policy stuff. And I think the same thing happens with trumpet, right? With our careers as trumpet players, is we assume that whatever this is in front of us, that's as far as it's going to go. That's not how life works. That's not how life works. There's always a progression. Either it's progressing in one direction or another direction. I don't believe in the polar ideas. I don't think everything is always polar. I don't think it's one or the other direction. I think there's a multitude of directions things can go in. But the bottom line is nothing stays the same. Nothing stays the same. That's a truism that you cannot deny. Nothing in this world, in this life, stays the same except God. Right? Nothing stays the same. The earth is constantly changing. People are constantly changing. Society is constantly changing. Everything. There is no, I was thinking about that in the context of styles. And let me explain why I was thinking about that. I have this project that I'm writing. I think the writing part of it, I'm not even a third of the way through it. I kind of took a break, but I'm not even a third of the way through writing the stuff. And I already have hundreds of turnarounds. And the idea is to do all of these turnarounds in one key before you do it. It's like the tonalization studies, but for jazz, right? And in fact, the tonalization concept is not just the scales. That's something I might not have said on these videos before. The tonalization concept is not just the scales. The tonalizations concept applies to everything that you practice. And that's why I'm doing the turnarounds at one key. But I've been doing them now for months, and I haven't gotten halfway through the first third. Like I said, I'm writing this long project with. It's probably going to have a couple thousand turnarounds in it. Extremely comprehensive, and these are the 2-measure turnarounds, not the 4-measure turnaround. Okay, 2-measure turnaround. And so I'm practicing these the other day, and I'm starting to get impatient because it's taking me so long to get through this. And I'm tempted to drop the 10 times thing, right? I think you guys know that. I repeat each one 10 times. When it's in jazz, I don't look at it when I'm playing it. I wouldn't really call that memory, because if you ask me to play any of them now, I wouldn't be able to do that for you. So it's not like I've memorized the book that I'm writing. So I look at it, and then I look away and I play it. And then I look at it, and then I look away and play it. If I have it memorized now, short-term memory, I'll just play it without looking at it. So anyway, I'm thinking to myself, if this takes this long, I won't get through all 12 keys in 20 years. Not at this rate. I would have to practice a lot more. And so while I'm practicing this, because I haven't changed it yet. I haven't changed my objective yet. But while I'm practicing it, I'm thinking to myself, why am I doing this? If it's not going to be done for that long, am I missing the point? And I realized that the biggest reason why I'm doing it is because of the flexibility that it gives me. My theory is, and I haven't finished doing the first key yet, but my theory is, if I can play all of these couple thousand of turnarounds in one key, that anytime I have anything in that key, it's going to be more flexible. I don't have to just play licks. I can actually communicate in that key. Now, why is that? What's that have to do with this thing about how the world is constantly changing? We don't know what styles people will pay for tomorrow. Jazz could be, it's already kind of less popular than it was. Jazz could be so entirely unpopular that nobody's making any money off of it. So really, am I practicing jazz or am I practicing something else? And it was that realization that helped me understand that I'm not practicing jazz. What I'm doing is perfecting my playing, perfecting my grasp of the knowledge, not the knowledge, the what do you call it, the language, so that it can be used in any context. And I was thinking about what it's like to not be like that way, right? Because if all I'm doing is playing regurgitated licks, then I'm not going to be as stylistically flexible when tomorrow comes and the musical landscape changes. I can't tell you where it's going to change, but I can promise you that the musical landscape is going to change. I don't know how I got onto this subject. But yes, this is how I see this. Your practice should not be so pigeonholed into one single style, because what happens if that style is no longer valuable? Yes, you can play jazz for your own, all of this stuff. To me, if you base your strategy, your practice strategy, on the assumption that things might not be the same tomorrow as they are today, then it dictates that your practice should be more flexible, that the results of your practice should lead towards something that you can apply to any style, any technical situation. You know that anyway, I won't go so any deeper into that. It's just something I've been thinking a lot about lately. And mainly because here I am in my late 50s, creeping up on 60, and I've started a project, just began a project that will probably take me 20 years to finish. What? And I talk to I have a lot of students that are over 60 years old, and they get this panic. They think they're running out of time. And I tell them, you can't think like that. That's not how it works, right? And but here I am starting a 20-year project and thinking to myself, I might not have enough time. And so, and here's the thing, right? The truth is, this project that I'm starting now, if I do 10 of them, and remember, I can't just do that, right? That project can't be the only thing I practice. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to do 3/4 of what I try to do, right? So if I understand that this project may never get finished, why am I doing it? Well, because this is the conclusion I came to for myself, right? I benefit from doing this, not from completing it. Just doing the little bit I've done already has already made me a better player. I hope that makes sense. That's how valuable that new project is. I'm not even 1/6 of the way through the whole thing. It's taken me, I said a year, I think it's been like 9 months. It's taken me 9 months to get through 1/6 of the whole thing, and that's just one key. And then you have to multiply that times 12 for the 12 different keys. And yes, you can see that it's a lot of work. Now I did decide I need to spend more time doing it. That's why I keep it open. It's open over there right now. I keep it open. I pick up my horn. I go over there and I do another one. I pick up my horn. I go over there and do another one. That's not officially part of my practice time. And I told you that for that 2 weeks I didn't practice, I did some of those. So I don't count that as practice, because let's say if my mom's in the shower or something, I'll pick up my horn and go through one of those, and one of them 10 times takes me about, okay, it's either 10 times or 20 times, depending on whether I do 2 octaves, right? Some of them fall out of my range if it's 2 octaves. If it fits in 2 octaves, I'll do 20 times, 10 in the lower octave, 10 in the higher octave. So yes, I'll just, whatever, I call it targets of opportunity, right? I'll just leave my horn out. My horn is always out. Okay, my horn is always on the stand. I never put it away. That's something my first college professor told me. Never put your horn out. Always leave it out so you can just pick it up and play when you need to play. But anyway, so my point is that practicing that project already at this stage has already helped make me a better player. Why would I alter it in any way just because I want the satisfaction of finishing it? Now, I have played with the idea of making a scaled down version of it for the students. That's something I'm playing with. But and that's part of what made me start thinking about cheating, right? Because I'm thinking, if I'm going to write a scaled down version for my students, why not practice that version myself? Well, because the one I'm doing is more beneficial. I'm getting more out of it. It's really amazing, really. So yeah, the turnaround thing is I'm very happy with it. Anyway, now Anthony says, I was fingerprinted for a job when I first got out of high school for a bank, and you got a fingerprint to be told if you pull a job, wear gloves because you have really sharp prints. Oh, I get it. Yeah, now they do it on glass. It's like a digital thing. I was fingerprinted, I think it was Boy Scouts. I think we went to see a police department or something like that, and they fingerprinted all of us kids. So I don't have anything against fingerprints per se. It's the encroaching on our privacy. I also have a problem with just how coddled the kids are today, but I won't go into that. Karen says, good for you. Yeah, I think she's talking about the 20 years thing. So anyway, any other questions? I've kind of been just blabbing today. I've had a lot on my mind lately. And that's why I talked about the changes, right? Nothing in this world stays the same. And so I'm going through a bunch of those changes right now, and that's why it's on my mind so much. And it's a good thing that I practice the way I do, because I'm pretty much set for all those changes, So I've never really liked that kind of trumpet playing, right? The jazz stuff. I remember going to a concert. I won't say where, I won't say when. That way nobody will know who I'm talking about. And the guy sounded like he was just playing other people's licks. Like there was clearly a Freddie Hubbard lick, clearly a Clifford Brown lick, clearly a Woody Shaw lick. And to me, that's not creative. That's like someone who takes those, I guess you can call that art, but when you take stuff from the magazines, cut out the magazines and put it on a piece of paper. I forgot what collage is that called a collage? So you could kind of say that jazz trumpet player I was talking about plays musical collages in his solos. Yes, Dave. Thanks for reminding me. Dave said you mentioned a question about sight reading from last week. Yes, I didn't finish talking about sight reading. And I don't remember how much I talked about it last week, but let's start from the beginning here. Okay. My opinion about sight reading. Now, I do remember telling you guys last week about how I was really good at salsa, and then I had this Guy Lombardo gig that kicked my butt. And they never called me back again. I don't blame them because I kept stepping in holes. Right? So like on the Guy Lombardo band stuff, right? I might be over exaggerating that, but really. And in fact, you know what? I think a lot of the Guy Lombardo charts that I've heard online were more hip than the ones that we played on that gig. So, but anyway, I kept anticipating everything. I kept stepping in the hole because what felt like to me should have happened an eighth note earlier. They had it on the downbeat. So, ba-do-da-ba, right? And they're going, ba-da-ba-ba. So, I don't know. So it just knocked me out on the way home. And so I thought to myself, hey, you know what? The reason why I couldn't play those charts is because I don't listen to that kind of music. I had a bunch of those albums that I got from my dad, not necessarily Guy Lombardo albums, but albums of that style. Stuff that I got from my dad and things that I collected elsewhere. And I just went home and I started listening to that stuff. And the next time I had a gig with that kind of music, I didn't have the same problem anymore. So let's talk about really my approach with the students for sight reading. Now, let me clarify first that I don't distinguish between sight reading and reading music. There's no difference between sight reading and just reading music. In fact, I also go as far as to say there's no difference between sight reading and transposing. It's just that transposing is a more difficult kind of sight reading. And the reason I feel this way is because the process is the same. The way it works in your head is the same. When you first start and you're reading those first 5 notes, the process is the same as when you're transposing as a pro. And before I tell you the steps, let's look at the way I see this is happening in your head. We want to get to where, this is the objective, right? We want to get to where we see the note on the paper. And by seeing that note, it triggers in us the memory of all of the physical stuff, all of the ear stuff, all of the phrasing, everything. Seeing it on the paper should trigger the whole package instantly. Of course, we don't start off that way, but the way we approach learning how to sight read should include all of those automatic triggers. We want the music to trigger that stuff inside of us so quickly that when we see the music on the paper, we hear it in our head, and all of them, the physical mechanisms that it takes to play that start. It's almost like salivating before you eat, right? It should really be like that. You see the music and your body just swells up, not swells up, wells up with this physical ability to play that music. And the way that works is that you see it, you hear it, and by hearing it, it happens. That's the end goal of sight reading. And you know, something I thought about after we stopped last time, if you guys saw the Q&A I did with Dennis Dotson, he said that sight reading was one of his best traits, and that he's a great sight reader. And I forget what I said, but I told him something along the way of, I struggle with sight reading. And I don't remember how I said it. I don't think I said I'm terrible at sight reading. Of course, I'm not terrible at sight reading. I sight read well enough to play professionally. And there's a lot of gigs that I play that the whole gig is just sight reading. Okay, so I don't mean to say that I am not good at sight reading. There's times when I have bad days. I hope that makes sense. But the reason I struggle is because I've always had reading disabilities. So for me to sight read and to teach sight reading, I had to overcome those reading disabilities as they affect my music. Okay? Now, when in the process of learning all this stuff and learning that it was a mental thing, something that needs to be automatic, I started looking at what that means in terms of our practice, right? So what is it that's got to be automatic? Well, the phrasing and all that stuff, you're not going to be able to do that without listening. So I think number one, the number one thing you need to do to improve your sight reading is listening. And you need to listen to the styles that you think you're going to be playing. And the more different styles you listen to, the more flexible you're going to be. So let's say you listen to, I'm just popping a number out there, 10 different styles of music. Let's say someone comes up with number 11 and asks you to sight read in that style. You won't struggle nearly as much on number 11 if you've been listening to 10 different styles. You won't struggle nearly as much as someone on number 11 who's been only doing 2 or 3 different styles. That just makes sense. Okay? So that's number one, is you need to listen. Listen. I tell my students at least 10 hours a week of listening. That's 5 days a week, 2 hours a day. $10 hours of listening a week. That's number one. Number two, tonalizations. You guys know what my tonalization studies are, I believe. The tonalization the tonalization concept is that you do everything that you know in one key. So let's say, for example, you don't have my books. Then you take all of the Herbert Clark, you take all of the Arbin, you take all of the whatever books that you're working out of, the technical books, right? And you do them in one key first. That's the tonalization concept. do all of the Clark technical studies in one key. Then instead of going back and doing the next key, go to the next book and do all of the scales studies or whatever you have in that book in one key. Do every book you have in one key and then go back and go to the next key. Now, we're talking about exercises, right? I'm not talking about etudes and stuff like that. Now, you can do it with etudes, but that's not what the tonalization concept is for. Kind of. I mean, it can be. The problem with the etudes is even though the key signature says that key signature, that doesn't mean the piece is in that key all the way through. So the more other stuff you add to the key, the less beneficial this concept becomes. So that's why it's mostly just exercises. And if you have a scale study that goes through all the scales, that doesn't work for this. So number 2 in my approach to learning, to getting to be a better sight reader, to where seeing the notes makes it automatic, you just play them. Number 2 is the tonalization stuff. Now, I do think that my tonalization studies are better than doing the Clark studies in one key at a time, because my stuff is more comprehensive. It covers your whole range. It covers all the different variations. So that's the second thing. And you can see why that would make a difference, right? If the notes are more automatic, that makes the music a little bit more automatic. Now, that's the sight reading is not just notes, obviously, but the notes need to be automatic. If the notes aren't automatic, you're going to slow everything down. Okay? You're going to slow the whole sight reading process down. So that's number 2 is tonalization. Number 3 is you have to learn rhythms, and you have to learn them within the style that you're playing, okay? And the best way to do that is to cover a lot of literature. Yes, you can do rhythm studies. That's a great thing to do if you're just getting started. So like there are rhythm books I used to have. I don't know where they are, so I won't go try to grab them. There are rhythm books it looks like a percussion book because it just has the one line. And you can count. I do believe in counting, by the way. 1, 2, and 3, 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, 4, and 1, all that stuff, right? 1 and a 2, 3 and a 4, 1 and a 2, and right? That kind of stuff. If you don't know how to do that, then I strongly recommend that you do learn how to do that. So that's number 3 is learn rhythms. Now, why do I say that the rhythms have to be in a stylistic context? Because playing the right rhythm isn't enough. You have to play the right rhythm with the proper emphasis. You have to put the right accents, the right long notes, the right short notes. You can play a correct rhythm and it can still sound wrong. That's something I discovered in my lessons, right? Someone would play the rhythm wrong and I'm like, wait, stop. That's not right. And they say, no, it's right. And I said, play it again. And they'll play it. And I'm saying, So they'll get the metronome out. And sure enough, they're playing it exactly right. Why does it sound wrong? It sounds wrong because they're accenting. and basically, if you accent wrong, you're basically changing the meter. It's like playing odd meter over something that's supposed to be in 4/4, right? So, um, so yes, we want to learn the rhythms, and these are two things that we want to do separately, right? The scales are separate. It doesn't sound like practicing scales is going to help you with sight reading, but if the notes are not automatic, how are you going to sight read? And same thing with the rhythms. You have to practice that separate, because if the rhythms are not automatic, let me tell you this about the rhythms. I believe in repetition. Repetition in as an educational device, repetition became in the 70s unpopular. 70s, 80s, 90s, and continued to get unpopular over time. And the argument was that the children don't have that kind of attention span, which is a chicken and the egg thing, right? Because that's how children get an attention span, is to make them do stuff over and over again. So by using attention span as a lame excuse for not doing repetition, they are actually self-fulfilling that prophecy. And I'll tell you what, I have not had a single young student ever, not a single one, that didn't have the attention span to repeat the material 10 times. So yes, that's another thing. Sorry about that. But yes, I believe in repeating those rhythms over and over again. And let me tell you this also as a little bonus tip. When you're practicing sight reading, if you say right now I'm practicing sight reading, you better be looking at what you're reading, okay? Because remember, what we're trying to establish is an automatic trigger that when you see the notes on paper, it automatically triggers all the mechanisms here that will play the notes properly. If you close your eyes and don't look at it, you're not building that trigger. So now you're going to say, well, didn't you just earlier say don't look at the music? Yes, I just did say that. There's times to look at the music. There's times to not look at the music. You got to know what it is you're trying to do. If you're working on your sight reading, you better be looking at the music. Because that's the whole point, to be able to see it and instantly be able to play it. How are you going to do that if you're not looking at it? And I have that problem with a lot of students, right? The beginners. And I can even tell better now because on the computer, right? Because most of my lessons today, I think I have 3 local students. Yeah, 3 local students. And the rest of them are on Skype. And I can see that they're not looking at the screen. They'll be like looking over there, trying to play the music. I'm like, what are you doing? So, so yes, when you're trying to learn how to read music, please look at the music. Okay, so yes, I believe that for the rhythms, you find a rhythm that you're having trouble with, section that off, stare at it, and play it. Well, first of all, clap it. Right? Clap the rhythm, then count the rhythm. 1, 3, 4, 1, 3 and 4, 1, 3, 4, 1, 3 and 4. Right? Then play it on one note. Ta 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 ta. Right? And then play what you have on there. Do it Do each one of those sections 3 times. Clap it not 3 times. Did I say 10 times. Clap it 10 times. Count it 10 times. Play it on one note 10 times. And all the while that you're doing that, stare at the music. I tell my students, the little ones, I tell them, like, pretend your eyes are laser beams and you're trying to burn holes in the music. Because we want to establish that automatic connection between what the notes look like and the production of that music. Okay? Now, the fourth thing on my list is all these are equally important. Number 1 was listening. Number 2 was tonalization. Number 3 is rhythms. Number 4 is doing the actual sight reading. Okay? Because you could do all these other 3 and not sight read, and your sight reading won't get any better. Okay? You have to actually spend time sight reading. I noticed a couple years ago that the songs on the gigs I was playing that were kicking my butt the most were marches. And so I decided, because I have a book of marches, let me show it to you. And what's nice about this book, it's the first parts of like a few hundred different marches. They're Xerox, which means they're bad copies. Bad Xerox copies, which makes them harder to read, which makes it just like a gig, right? So what I do is I'll open up to the next one, look it up on YouTube, click play, and I play along with YouTube, with the video. And I don't fix anything. I just read it through. When it's over, I turn the page, I go to the next one. You gotta spend time doing the sight reading, and it has to be in the style that you're trying to learn. If you're trying to learn, for example, how to sight read salsa music, you better be sight reading salsa music. In this case, I was having trouble sight reading marches, so I made myself start sight reading marches. Okay? Now, you don't have to have, let me clarify that. You don't have to have a track to play along with to sight read. It just helps to keep you on time, which is an aspect. Now, let's talk about a few different ways that you can do that sight reading. Might as well point out at this point that I have over 100 play-along videos, and that's a great way to do that sight reading, is with play-along videos. And you can find those on my website on the video tab. And yes, you know what? I've used those things. I've used my own play-along videos to practice, not necessarily sight reading. Well, yes, you know, the ones that are more difficult, that is, even though I wrote the music, that's still sight reading. But yes, you can, and it doesn't have to be mine either. You can use anybody's. You just put trumpet play along on YouTube and play along videos come up. That's a great way to practice sight reading. Another more traditional way is to play duets with your friends. Another way to practice sight reading is to just join a band. Okay? And if you are into spending money, there are enough play-along packages. There's Music Minus One. There is, and I think Hal Leonard now has a bunch of those too. If you have the money to buy a bunch of them and cycle through them, that's sight reading too. I've been collecting those because I use them with my students. Anyway, I hope that makes sense. Those are the 4 things I try to cover in sight reading. Now, Gonya is asking, does Texas Allstate have sight reading in the audition? No, Texas does not. I think if Texas did, it would be a game changer, right? Okay, Anthony says, when we first meet up in band, we always seem to sight read first time. Of course, if you do sight reading more often, it does get better. That's correct, it does get better. Hello, Biori. I'm interested in trumpet, but don't have the money to buy the instrument. What can I train without the instrument? Well, the most important thing you can do without an instrument is to solfeggio. My highest recommendation for getting started, if you don't have an instrument, is solfeggio. So some people call it solfeggio, some people call it solfeggio, some people call it solfege. Okay, and that's where you do do, re, mi. And the very first thing you would want to do is the expansion. So you just go do, re, do. And I strongly recommend that you do that 10 times. Even though that sounds like a waste of time, it's not a waste of time. Do, re, do. Do it again. Do, re, do. You do that 10 times. Now you go up to mi. Do, re, mi, re, do. 10 times. Do, re, mi, re, do. And then up to fa, up to so, up to la. And then you just find all kinds of stuff that you can to practice your solfeggio. The better you get solfeggio, the better your trumpet will be when you start playing. You know, I would teach more. If I had the confidence in my students that they wouldn't all quit. And you know what? I get closer and closer to that every year because of my reputation, right? I do have a wonderful reputation as a trumpet teacher, and I'm happy for that. But if I could trust all my students not quit, I would make them all do like lots and lots and lots of solfeggio. I really would. So anyway, that's my recommendation for that. Gonya says New Jersey Allstate does have sight reading, but it's weighted the least out of everything. Okay, I see that. You know, I thought the words, I don't know if I said it out loud. If we had in Texas sight reading in the audition, it would be a game changer. And the reason I say that is because a lot of these students will spend like 2 hours a day, every day for whatever it is, 4 months, I think, 3 months, learning that music. And a lot of times they're not actually really very good players. And the sight reading thing here would change would flip a lot of the students. Some of them wouldn't make Allstate that have been making Allstate. I can guarantee you that. Dave says, I took your advice on involving myself in the culture. Good. And joined a local community band. It's been very challenging, but helped me enormously. Thanks, Eddie. You're very welcome. I'm glad to hear that. You know, you cannot I say sometimes that stuff that sounds like I'm trying to not sell lessons, right? But I think that playing in an ensemble is more beneficial to your playing than taking lessons is. I really believe that. Now, you have to have a certain proficiency to get there first, right? If you're an absolute beginner, you can't do that yet, unless you find a band that's willing to work with absolute beginners. But yes, as soon as you're ready to play, and for me, it's a proficiency thing. Once my students get past that tyro level, I think it's time for them to find an ensemble. Now, that's been kind of messed up because of COVID, right? COVID has kind of screwed that up. And to tell you the truth, a lot of my students just don't want. Now, I used to be much more insistent than I am today about students being in an ensemble. But the truth is, there are some players that they just don't want to play in public. Their reasoning for playing the instrument has nothing to do with playing in public. And for those students, why should they play in an ensemble? They would be better off playing with a music -1. And when you really talk to them, it's not that they're afraid. It's not that they've got low self-esteem or anything like that. It's nothing like that. They just don't want to play in public. And who's to say that those people shouldn't be taking lessons, right? So, and if they don't want to play in public, then and they're going to take lessons with me, then I shouldn't be pushing them to do that. That's how I see it. But that said, if you do play in a band, it does make you, there's a student that I have. I've been teaching him, I think, since he was in 1st grade. He's in 6th grade now. And this year is his first time playing in a band. And if you were to track his progress, it's like, yes, he progressed, but then he got in the band and it's like, whoop. Now he's progressing like this. It's like almost instantly he's playing at a better rate as a better player. All right, Biori says, thanks for the recommendation. I will practice the solfeggio and save up to buy a trumpet. Did I already read that? I think I might have already read that. Karen says, I like our community band, especially because I get to play alongside much better players. That's a big part of it, that offer tips and encouragement. Yes, that's a big, big, big part of it. All right, guys, I'm 10 minutes over. Thanks for hanging out. I wasn't sure how many people would show up today because of the time. Because of not posting it earlier. But anyway, thank you so much. Remember that if you want questions answered before, like if you can't make it next week, please go to the website and go to the Q&A page on the website and leave your question there, okay? All right, well, God bless you guys. We will see you next time. Have a great week and all that. All right, bye.